So when we take a look at the world of unstructured data, what we find is that a big portion of unstructured data is something that is called text. What is text? It's what people write or talk. When people are writing or talking, they're using text. And the thing about the text is, pardon me, it's very rich in business value. So when we look at all of the data in the corporation, this is what we find. Now, people have recognized the value of text, and they've tried to process it manually. And trying to do, what do I mean by manual? I mean by trying to physically read documents or sit down, pardon me, and listen to conversations. And when you try to do that manually on a person-by-person basis, this is a really bad idea. Why is manual processing a bad idea? Because there's simply too much text out there to be processed manually. If we're serious about using text in decision making, we need to put text into a database. But putting a text into a database is like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. For a variety of reasons, it just doesn't work out very well. So let's now take a look at how our industry has tried to use text in databases before. At first, we started with something called comments fields. And this is where a programmer would define a field called a comments field, and we would put text in there. But there's a lot of problems with just simply creating a place for text. One problem is that one person writes one sentence and another person writes a whole paragraph of information. It's very uneven. But there's a lot of other problems with simply creating comments. Then the database vendors came along with something called blobs. And what is a blob? A blob is something that can accommodate various sizes of text. And so we solved one of the problems of dealing with text, but there's still a lot of problems with blobs. Trying to go into a blob and make sense of it is very difficult. And then we had some other techniques called SoundX and stemming. And these are interesting techniques to address language, but these techniques have a very limited business applicability. They're interesting ways to go about looking at text, but there's not really anything that is produced that's useful from SoundX or stemming. And then after we have SoundX and stemming, we have tagging. Tagging is the practice of going into a document, finding what you think you want to find, and then making note of it. The problem with tagging is you have to know what you're looking for before you go into the document. And that's presents a problem because the person writing the document can write anything they want. However, tagging is the first legitimate effort towards understanding the text in a document. And after we have tagging, NLP, taxonomies, and machine learning. And NLP, taxonomies, and machine learning, all three start to make a genuine effort and a genuine attempt to go into the world of text and make sense of it to where we can use it. However, there's a couple of limitations of NLP, taxonomies, and machine learning. On top of that sits something called textual ETL. Textual ETL is the state of the art in being able to read text, understand what's important, and turn that text into a database. So these have been the different stages our industry's gone through in order to create a meaningful way of dealing with text. So let's talk about textual ETL. You probably haven't heard of it before, but because it's relatively new technology. But what does textual ETL do? Well, textual ETL does essentially two things. It reads your raw text and then puts it into a database. That's the first thing that it does. The second thing that it does is it takes your raw text and finds what's called context, so that when you're dealing with text, in order to make sense of text, you have the need to look at the context of text as well. So to give you an idea of what I mean by context and its importance, suppose you're reading a document and you run across the word iron. Now, what does iron mean? Well, if you're a golfer, iron is one of the clubs that you have. If you're a woman doing laundry, an iron is something you use to straighten out the clothes. If you're a pharmacist, iron is a type of pill. So when you see the word iron, iron can mean anything. Well, anything. It can mean lots of different things, each of which is very different. And so in order for us to understand what the text means, we have to understand the context as well as the text itself. And so what textual ETL does for you is to put your data into a database and establish the context for the text itself. So when you take a look at the database and what's inside your database, you have such things as the word, the context of the word, the source of the word, and the byte address. These are the bare minimum of what you need in terms of your database structure. So again, you read raw text, you analyze it, you put the raw text into the form of a database with these elements in the database. Now, one of the things that you find is that in this world today, nobody wants a database. Everybody talks about it, everybody needs it, but they don't really want a database. What people want is visualizations. If you go to any manager and start to try to sell something to that manager, if you try to sell it in the form of a database, most managers won't want it at all. What managers want are visualizations, nice, pretty little graphs that illustrate what is in the text itself. That's what management thinks it needs in today's world. So you say, okay, Bill, thanks for telling me about this. Can you give me some examples? And sure, let's talk about call centers. Now, what is a call center? A call center is something that the corporations have, to where there is a public telephone number that you can pick up the phone, dial the number, and say something to the corporation. And the world of commerce has call centers, and it's very useful to be able to find out what's going on in your call center. What are people in the world talking to your company about? What do they want to change in their product? How do they want to install something? What do they want to buy that's new? There's all kinds of things that people can say when they have a conversation with an organization. So here's an example of a call center information. And over on the right-hand side, we see the words that have occurred during a conversation. Now, this particular conversation is for a telephone company, and they have a bank of operators sitting there daily waiting to take your call, and you can call in. And people talk about the interference of the weather, of lightning, and things like that. They talk about installation. They talk about problems they're having. They talk about all kinds of things. And in a day's time, this particular telephone company gets around 75,000 phone calls a day. And when we talk to this telephone company, we ask them, what do you do with your information coming from your call center? And they looked at us and said, well, we don't really do anything with it. And we asked them, why don't you do it? Don't you think it's important what your customer is saying? And the people come along and say, Bill, we get 75,000 of these calls a day, and no person on this earth can sit there and read everything that somebody has said. Because if we tried that, and he says, you read 5,000 or 6,000 comments and you can't remember anything that anybody has said. So trying to manually read all of these pieces of information is not something that is a worthwhile or useful thing to do. So we told them, well, we can take what you have here and put it into the form of a visualization. And this is a visualization of the phone conversations that have occurred. Now, on the top left-hand side, we see the general categorization of what the phone call was about. Was somebody complaining? Was somebody wanting to install something? Was somebody wanting to buy something? What were people talking about? On the bottom right-hand side, we have the distribution of the time of day in which the call came in. And you can see at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning, there was not anybody talking to the telephone company. But at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, there were people talking. On top of that is the same distribution, except that it's not by the hour of the day, it's by the day of the week. And here we see what the calls we got on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so forth and so on. Then on top of that is a distribution across the month. Is there a monthly pattern to weigh the calls coming in? And indeed, when we look at this, we see that in the first 1 or 2 weeks of the month is when we don't get many phone calls, but for whatever reason, around the 16th and 17th of the month is when we get the calls. And then in the middle of the chart is probably the most interesting information of all, because this is an identification of the words that are being said in the conversation. Now, in the world of telephones, the biggest block there is STB. That stands for Setup Box, which is a little control unit that the telephone company gives you to control things going on in your house, like your television. And that's the main thing that people talked about. Then next to it is TV. That's the next thing people talked about. And so you can see what people are talking about in your call center. This gives you the complete larger picture of what your customer is saying to you. So you can go in and take your telephone calls and turn them into a visualization. And this is how it's done. Now, the world of telephones is not the only place where you can use this kind of information. Another kind of place that you can use the ability to hear your customer is in the hotel restaurant world. If you've ever run a restaurant, you know that listening to your customer is important. Why? Because if you don't listen to your customer, you're soon out of business. So one way to have people coming in constantly to your business is to understand what they're saying and what they want. And so how do you listen to what your customer is saying in a restaurant? This particular restaurant that we were working with had a website in which people would go to the website and leave messages. And a typical message, and this is one out of thousands of messages, I just picked this one randomly, but this said, product, Caesar salad Parmesan. Chicken breast, I have ordered a Caesar salad with Parmesan chicken breast twice now. Both times the restaurant neglected to include the chicken in my to-go order. Also today I was given dressing that had separated. I called and was told that that's just how it's going to be. I love your restaurant and was very disappointed. Not a good experience at all. And so again, this particular comment was selected from thousands of comments. In this particular case, somebody was upset with the restaurant and they had reason to be upset. And so this is the kind of information your restaurant manager needs to be able to keep the customers that you have and to have a good experience. So what we did was we took the customer comments and created a visualization. This is another example of a simple visualization. And what we did was we divided the comments up into different categories. For example, we see a category of people, place, price, process, product, etc., and so forth. So people, who would that be? That would be the cashier, that would be the waitress or waiter, that would be the people that work in the restaurant as well. Place, that would include what does the place look like? Is it a cheap, dirty place? Is it a clean place? Are the windows clean? Are the bathrooms clean in the restaurant? What does the place look like? And then price. What are people charging for the meals that they get? Process. Process is how long did you have to wait to get it to a table? How long did you have to wait before your waiter came and serviced your order? How long did it take to cook the food and prepare the food? That would be the process. Product would be the menu itself. Chicken, steak, spaghetti, fish, vegetables, dessert, things like that. So these are the categories of information that we divided the comments up into. And then we went in and saw, identified the comments by how happy or sad people were to be there. And we see that things that are in red are dissatisfied, things that are in green are very satisfied, etc., and so forth. So this is the graph that we created from the comments that people were making about the restaurant. Now this particular graph is actually quite instructive because it tells the restaurant what people think of their experience in the restaurant. But there's two important things that are really interesting in this restaurant. Take a look at the number of comments that there were about price, that in terms of people complaining the restaurant is too expensive, nobody said anything about price. So what message does this give you as a manager? When nobody says anything about price, it says you're probably not charging enough, because it's only when you start to charge a little bit more than the average, that's when people start to notice price. But if nobody is even noticing price, then you are probably leaving money on the table. And there's not a business person around that can leave money on the table and be in business very long. The same goes for promotion. Promotions are what organizations sometimes do, advertising, things on television, things like that. This particular restaurant chain did a lot of promotion, but nobody said anything about promotion. And what does that tell you? That tells you that the promotions you're doing are not very effective. That if you're doing your promotions properly, people should be very excited about it and very pleased. But when people don't even notice the promotions that you're doing, then you are in a position of you're better off not doing any promotion than promotions that are ineffective. So there's a lot to be learned from this chart. And where did this chart come from? This chart came from the text of the comments that people had about the restaurant. Now, another place where you find people commenting is on the world of airlines. And if you don't believe me that you can find comments about airlines, go out to the internet sometime. And if you go out to the internet, you will find many things that people say about the airlines they have. Nearly all of them are complaints. So one day we went out to the internet and got a bunch of the comments that people were making. And actually, we got this particular study. We got comments from people from all over the world, from Europe, from Mideast, from United States, from South America, Australia, Asia, and everywhere. And we gathered up a whole bunch of comments and decided to process them. Then we took the comments and did our analysis on them and created a visualization. And so we asked, what are people concerned about? What do airline passengers, what's the main thing that bothers them? Is it the reservation? Is it the cost? Is it being on time? Is it luggage and baggage? Is it the seating, being in first class or not in first class? So what is it that most people are talking about? So we created a visualization here for the comments that people were making about their airline travel. In addition to which, we took a look at the airlines that were mentioned. The number one airline that we were able to get comments about was somebody called United Airlines and then American Airlines. And given that nearly every one of the comments that we saw was negative, this is a good way to rank the airlines of the world. And if you saw this, you would say, what is the world's worst airline? The world's worst airline would be United Airlines, followed by American Airlines. And it's a sad comment about the world of airlines that we should even be able to say this. But these are some of the conclusions you can come to when you look at the information from air travelers on the internet. Another interesting place where there's a lot of information that's out there are medical records. I don't know if you've ever looked at a medical record, but when you look at medical records, a major portion of the medical record is in the form of text. And being able to, and you say, well, okay, Bill, what's the big deal? Why should I worry? Don't I want that text? And here's the answer. If what you're looking for is the medical records for a single patient, then having it in text is just fine. A doctor can sit down and read the information in text for a given patient, and that works just fine. But what happens when you want to study a disease such as COVID, for example, and you want to say, okay, how does COVID affect people? Is it better or worse for men versus women? Is it better or worse for people over 50 years old or under 50? Is it better or worse for people of different races? So the ability to look at not just one record or two records, but 100,000 or 200,000 records is very valuable information for the world of medicine and healthcare. And the problem is that when you want to look at 10,000 or 100,000 records, you're not going to be able to do it manually. You've got to have some way of taking the text that's in those medical records and put them into the form of a database. And so here's a typical medical record. This is one that we happen to find. And in this medical record, we find information about medications and procedures and diagnosis and past medical history. This is typical of what you find in a medical record. So what we're going to do, pardon me, what we're going to do is go into the medical record and look for these things. We're going to be looking for diagnostic information. We're going to be looking for medications, for conditions, for negation, where the doctor says the patient did not have COVID, etc., and so forth. So this is the what a medical record looks like. Here is the database that's created from analyzing the medical record. And you can see that you can go in and look for the different conditions. You can go in and look for medications and things like that, and find what's in your medical record. Once you put your medical record into the form of a database, now you can easily look at 100,000 records or even 1 million records. Something that you can't do when you are looking at a handful of records and having to read them manually. So this turns out to be then what people need to do. They need to start to look at the textual information that you have in your organization. And so who needs textual information? The answer is everybody needs it. Restaurants, hotels, banks, telephone companies, doctors, hospitals, pharmaceuticals, airlines, government agencies, manufacturers, everybody has got textual information that they're not using today. That's who needs your textual information. So that's been our presentation today. I want to tell you, we have some white papers. They're free, they don't cost anything. I'll be happy to send you some more information about how to manage text. And just this is my email address. By the way, just in case you would like to know it, there are books that are out there on the subject that I've written, and you're welcome to look at some of the books. One of the books is called Hearing the Voice of Your Customer. Another of the books is called Turning Text into Gold. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on the thing about text is corporations have all of this data processing going on, but they oftentimes don't even look at text. And that's a shame because there's great value in being able to look at and manage and look at text. So with that, I want to thank you for inviting me to your conference. Maybe next year I can come to Colombia and South America and see my friends down there again. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you. Very interesting, and we were very happy to hear you, and we will have to tell you that we are really satisfied, and all of the people are, and the comments are very excited to hear your conference. So thanks a lot for your participation, and well, okay.
Thank you so much.
Entonces, bueno, pues les agradecemos a todos su escucha, y yo creo pues que aprendimos muchas cosas, y pues fue un honor estar con Bill Aymon para que nos contara sus experiencias y conocimientos. Entonces, bueno, les agradecemos mucho. Ahorita tenemos esta tarde a las 3 de la tarde el foro de investigación, en donde ahorita mismo Alejita les mandas porfa los enlaces, y también a las 6 de la tarde tenemos el foro de los panelistas de toda la semana. Tenemos a Milan Sánchez, tenemos a Kevin Lewis, tenemos a ¿quién más? A Jihan. Y va a estar Fabiola liderando y coordinando el foro. Entonces les agradecemos muchísimo. Mañana pues ya es la parte del fin de los cursos del DAMA y el curso de la escuela. Entonces pues esperamos que este sea el inicio de una muy grande y fuerte y activa comunidad en gestión de datos. Nosotros desde la Escuela Colombiana de Ingeniería y con el apoyo de DAMA Capítulo Colombia, estamos muy emocionados de haber comenzado este camino que estoy segura que va a ser muy largo. No sé si de pronto Marco no, sino Germán, estaba por ahí para contarnos algo o bueno, no sé. Ahí estaba, pienso, no sé. O Mónica o Marco. Bueno, de todas maneras, pues entonces les agradecemos muchísimo y esperamos continuar con este tipo de eventos entre el DAMA y la escuela para hacernos cada vez más fuertes en el tema de gestión de datos. Entonces, bueno, no siendo más, les agradecemos mucho. Quedamos en contacto, les compartiremos por mail los enlaces para los videos de las conferencias. También tenemos todas las presentaciones que nos han dejado los conferencistas. Entonces haremos un paquete para ponerles el acceso a todo esto. No sé si hayan más preguntas. Ahí están, sí, los enlaces, etcétera. Marco, muchas gracias y a todos muchas gracias por acompañarnos y seguiremos en contacto con estos temas de gestión de datos.